public forum may be answered by the chairman at the end of the public forum, or delegated to county staff to provide a follow-up response after the meeting. For questions requiring follow-up or requiring additional details, you may contact the county through the email contact information provided on the agenda. Past week, and these are the first couple items on the agenda, Mrs. Smith has graciously provided for review by the committee these documents: AMR contract, Amendment 1 and Amendment 2, AMR certificate, and some data on AMR volume, the interlocal service agreement with the Village Center Community Development District in Sumter County, which is for information only. University of Florida Department of Emergency Medicine contract for medical director services, and that is for information only as well. Gentlemen, are you ready to proceed with the presentations? First, I'd like to invite up Chief Rob Hanson from Sumter County Fire Department. Chief, I know you're going to be seated during the presentation, and I do want to thank you for gracing us with your presence tonight. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Quiet as I
Is on. Thank you so much, sir. So starting off, obviously, my name is Rob Hanson, Fire Chief, Sumter County Fire EMS. I was asked, like others, to present a presentation to the committee today. So I'll put together this brief overview of our department. So Sumter County Fire EMS is internationally accredited from the Center for Public Safety Excellence. Currently under the 9th edition, that includes 252 performance indicators. 86 of them are core competencies. We are actually an applicant agency for reaccreditation under the 10th edition, which has one less performance indicator, but has increased to 93 core competencies. Incidents for our department are handled with fire engines, ladder trucks, water tenders, various utility vehicles, be it brush trucks, supervisor vehicles, and whatnot. Our fire station staffing consists of 3 to 5 people, supervised by a company officer, which we hold at the rank of lieutenant. Our operations division, the largest division, is managed by a deputy fire chief. And the daily activities of that operation are coordinated and supervised by 6 battalion chiefs. That's 2 per shift or 2 per day. The second division is the professional standards division. That's also managed by a deputy fire chief. And he is supported by a trainer captain and health and safety captain. We provide these emergency and non-emergency programs directly to the citizens from 8 staffed fire stations. That includes 96 operations members and 5 administrative staff. We provide fire suppression, emergency medical services, technical rescue, hazardous materials response, public education and outreach, community risk reduction, training and safety, and a SWAT medic program. Looking kind of a little deeper into these programs, and a little short explanation. Fire suppression is, the search and rescue of victims that are trapped by the flames. Suppression of the flames, more or less putting the fire out. Ventilation of the smoke and products of combustion, along with overhaul, salvage. This can occur in pretty much every environment. However, mostly encountered are in buildings, vehicles, in the wild land, in the brush, marine environments. Emergency medical services are also delivered through the same apparatus as fire suppression. So we do that with our fire engines, ladder trucks, water tenders, and so on. This is the evaluation, assessment, and treatment of the sick and injured. We do this with cross-trained firefighters and officers who are EMTs and paramedics, and we work under the license of the Sumter County Medical Director. The technical programs, technical rescue, these are at the technician level with cross-trained rescue technicians who are also firefighters, EMTs, and paramedics. They're stationed throughout the county, but the equipment cache is at Fire Station 22 in Bushnell. This can be trapped, entangled, or stranded victims in situations where it requires a little bit more training, a more advanced technical expertise, and obviously some more advanced equipment. These could be collapses, surface water rescues, wildland emergencies. We also provide large animal rescue capabilities. The Florida Department of Agriculture has trusted us with it as custodians of a regional large animal rescue cache that's also kept in Bushnell. Our hazardous materials response, those are provided at the operations level from every fire apparatus, but specifically at the technician level from cross-trained hazardous materials technicians at Fire Station 21, as well as throughout the county. These services include isolation and control of those hazardous materials releases, but we do not do the cleanup and transportation of that. That mitigation is solely for the to stop any situations where there's life safety that's involved, then stop the release from becoming uncontrolled, or stop it and control it, and then try to protect the environment. Once that's done, the mitigation is the responsibility of the spiller or the releaser. As far as public education and youth outreach, our operations division provides some public education presentations when we're able to see the kids in the schools at various youth and civic organizations. These involve show and tell with the fire trucks and firefighters. Sometimes it's just a visit by one of those organizations or just a group of people to the fire station. We use these special events. There are always opportunities for public education, and kids just really love big, cool fire trucks, and captivating the attention of the kids gives us the ability to captivate the attention of the parents and sort of provide a similar opportunity for them to be aware of one targeted situation or another. Throughout that youth outreach, we also provide a scholarship opportunity to high school seniors. When we go to the primary and the secondary schools, it's really about the typical stop, drop, and roll, some targeted programs with Sparky the Fire Dog or any of those others, and showing off the really cool fire truck and giving them little plastic hats that they love. But when they get a little older, we start trying to prepare them for their responsibilities as adults, whether it's just to learn fire safety as a normal citizen who's going to encounter these situations that way as a civilian, or if they desire to get into the public service as a career. This is our capture opportunity, and giving these scholarships helps them get into the organization and into the field in a situation where they might not be able to before. We've had a lot of success with that. Just under about a dozen so far. We've had some good retention with those. One left and then came back. So we feel pretty successful in the fact that we've given these people some education and they're able to go out into the world and use it. Community risk reduction is, in our department, we utilize the Development Services Department of the Board of County Commissioners. They do these services with their annual fire inspections. They also engage the adult community through different programs targeted at not just fire prevention, but things like fall prevention and emergency preparedness. Development Services also provides all of our fire plan and fire inspections for the new construction that's not inside the village's age-restricted development. Training and safety is provided by our Professional Standards Division. This is continuous education to the department staff. We give them various opportunities in-house. I'm sorry, I'm not even keeping up with this over here. We give them these opportunities in-house through training from our instructors, online or other external opportunities. We also monitor and supervise their work practices to ensure that we're making sure that they're physically and mentally fit, but also that we're providing those services in a manner that's safe and within the acceptable industry standards. Members of that division also help provide accreditation management. They do our after-action research and help to establish outcome evaluations. The accreditation management and the outcome evaluations is, in particular, a relatively new methodology that we're sliding into with the 10th edition of our accreditation self-assessment. And then SWAT medic program, we work closely with the Central County Sheriff's Office SWAT team. Those tactically trained paramedics work with them not only in the aspect of the emergency evacuation or activation. But they spend a lot of time with them when they're training. That training is intense and is in all weather and all seasons. So they act similar to a health and wellness officer while they're out there, monitoring their techniques, monitoring their health, and then deploy with them under tactical situations so that there's a forward presence should the unspeakable happen. The response to them is there with somebody who's trained with them and understands their tactics. Those activities as those paramedics is also endorsed by and under the direction of the county medical director. Ms. Smith after the last meeting indicated that there were some questions specifically that you wanted to address in the presentation. So rather than embedding them into the presentation, I just went right to question and answer. So some of them seem very general, and so I'll give you a very objective answer to the question. So the first that was presented to me was, how does transport affect fire and EMS? And quite simply, the answer is to explain how our system works, where we are ALS first response provider. Our EMTs arrive, evaluate, stabilize patients, and that starts as soon as they arrive and sometimes before. And that treatment continues until the patient's transferred to either an ambulance or a helicopter. The significance of that is that unit is committed to the patient during that treatment time. They're not able to leave until they're able to transfer that care, and that care can continue in that next chain, let's link the chain of survival. So the effect of transport is the fact that we are there until we're leaving. What are challenges facing fire and EMS? And this is a global stance. This isn't necessarily just local or even regional. I spend a significant amount of time researching and interacting with the Florida Fire Chiefs Association, International Association of Fire Chiefs, and a cohort from the Executive Fire Officer Program. And so reaching out and kind of listening to some of the problems, this doesn't seem to be just a local issue. But we're facing increased service demands. And those service demands don't necessarily mean an increase in volume. Some of those demands or some of those needs of the community are just different types of ways we're asked to respond and provide service. We're facing a cancer risk, and I don't necessarily think this is an increase in the risk. It's really an increase in a manifestation of how cancer is affecting our firefighters. Same with emotional stress and mental wellness. It's not new, but it's newly manifesting. We're newly researching it, and we're finding that a lot of these things can correlate. So those are challenges for us to keep our employees, keep our brothers and sisters safe while they're out there doing the things we ask them to do. Public information is similarly a challenge. Getting the right information out with the right intent, and then making sure that that's disseminated in a way that expresses exactly how you intend it to be, can be challenging in not just fire and EMS industry, but in most. We faced evolving technology and some contemporary fire hazards. Things aren't really built the same way they were 20 years ago, and they're not built 20 years ago the way they were 40 years ago. So more things in our homes are becoming plastic, and plastic burns hotter and it burns faster and it fails a whole lot quicker than wood and metal. Those things require us to change our techniques, provides more cancer risk, makes the effects of fire happen faster for us. Resource competition, sorry, I skipped over that. Resource competition doesn't necessarily also mean a local thing, but they're only able to build fire trucks so fast, and some people in the construction industry are finding that certain building materials are scarce to come by, and no matter where the money's coming from, it's only coming from one pot in many cases. So those are competing resources that we have to keep apprised of. They become challenges. We've had to adapt those firefighting techniques, like I explained, regarding how fires are burning, what people keep in their homes, hybrid battery technology. All those require an ever-changing challenge to how we face the fire service today. And then COVID-19 really revolutionized emergency care. It required us to do a lot of adaptation to how we treat patients, how we evaluate them, how we protect ourselves. This sort of moves into the last question that I was able to answer here, was I'm sorry, the last question will be, we'll continue with the COVID then. How is the current system working? Allows for the closest unit to respond to any incident. We're able to evaluate the circumstances and mitigate those problems. We provide those services via the online and offline control of the medical director. Like I said before, we get there, we treat, and then we transfer care. How is this working, or how do we measure that it's working? We measure our performance at the 90th percentile. This is associated with our accreditation. We use the elements of total response time, call processing, shoot, travel. Effective response force is important too, to understand that just because the first truck got there, there's also a ticking clock going to how long it took everybody that's needed for the call to get there. And that's a measurement methodology you can use as well. This is accredited through the Center of Public Safety Excellence, and our methodology has been validated by them. Our annual compliance report I was able to submit to you. It includes that 2017 to 2020 aggregate performance data. Keeping in mind that those are emergency or lights and sirens responses. And that's just how they asked us to report it to them. So back to COVID, when the question was asked what's going on this year, COVID-19 has happened this year. It required a lot of adaptation to how we provide services. We had to change some ways we do personal protective equipment and body isolation. Way we screen patients, we have to screen them, isolate them, make sure we're treating in the right way, but also other comorbidities that are going along with that COVID-19 response. This change in call volume throughout the year, and seems like it changes sometimes every day, that treatment and transport expectation along with that change in call volume created the need for us to change our priority of resource deployment and allocation, and I believe that to have been system-wide. We had to make sure that we're setting the most appropriate resource in the most appropriate mode to make sure that we weren't inadvertently overwhelming the system and underwhelming it in other ways. That's the last slide. I'm not really keeping up with this here, sorry about that. For mine, I will entertain questions before.
Gentlemen, any questions?
I have a few. Unfortunately, I didn't get the email, so I didn't get the chance to review all your data. So I'm going to kind of shoot from the hip, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
My name's Jeff Bogue. First of all, I commend your department. I recently had the unfortunate event of watching them function in a structure fire in our neighborhood. Hats off to them. They did a great job. Young man, the first on scene was a tanker, and he stuck the truck in the mud, but he didn't stop there. He pulled the line and protected the exposure. So hats off to the department. I was impressed with your department's their water tanker operation. Quite impressive. So hats off to them. But we're here for EMS. And so some of the questions that I have are, all of your trucks or all of your apparatus, are they all ALS certified, or do you have ALS and BLS, a combination of both?
So all the fire engines and ladder trucks are ALS and BLS, so we can drop if needed, but they are all ALS certified. The water tenders are not. The water tenders, like you explained, we have to make sure that they're available to shuttle water and not necessarily using those resources for EMS. They can, and they're equipped if they come upon an emergency, but those aren't. Our supervisor vehicles utilize ALS equipment and function at an ALS level.
Do you currently have your supervisors operated like what we see in this earlier data? You're giving QRVs, they're talking about these quick response vehicles.
They're in pickup trucks. They respond depending upon the level of emergency. And sometimes if they are the closest unit, they won't pass it. But they're not dispatched specifically as a QRV. They function as one when needed. It's a supervisor and they're in a pickup truck, and it gets them around.
Okay. What does your typical EMS response look like?
So we'll dispatch the closest engine or ladder that's either 3 or 4 people, depending upon how they're staffed, that will respond to the scene. One of the people on that truck is always a paramedic. If we are in a situation where they come down to BLS, where there isn't a paramedic, then we'll utilize a response either from the request of that supervisor or another unit that has it. But those units respond in the fire engine or the ladder truck to it.
But you ensure each response is an ALS response? You have an ALS provider. Do your medics ever retain custody of the patient to the hospital, or do they always turn them over to the third party?
Never and always are pretty absolute
They are.
words, but the expectation is that they turn care over. There is always going to be, or there is always a potential for mitigating circumstance.
Sure.
And in times that's happened, but typically that's not retain, it's ride in and help.
Who do you train with? Your EMS groups? Do you have internal training only, or do you use external educators? Do you leverage your relationship with the University of Florida at all?
We do. The University of Florida medical directors provide us with that level of education that they see fit. They provide us so far with, a skills type station, education associated with the actual protocols. They provide us with some opportunities for us to go do that from afar, either at another hospital. We have an online training platform for our EMS CDUs and EMS training. We have in-house instructors that are more or less supervised or associated with the medical directors, their need. We also train with AMR for ACLS, CPR, PALS, and then also, occasionally we'll bring a helicopter in and train together on those apparatus.
A little bit off topic. You mentioned and talked a little bit about the SWAT medic program. Are your employees also sworn police officers, so they're carrying, or are they just medical attendants?
So they are not. They're not carrying. Some have previously been sworn officers and may still carry that certification, but they don't carry. They're not in what's traditionally called the stack. When they deploy to a forward location, it's a protected armored vehicle. They're not necessarily inside the breach.
Okay. You talked about some community education. Are you aware of the new law they just passed for the school, the new statute about that? Do you have plans to do anything with the local schools?
So I just became aware through the Florida Fire Chiefs regarding this. I'm assuming you're talking about high schools and CPR. So we have CPR instructors. We have that capability. So that will be a program that we'll look into.
Is that something you partner with AMR at all with? Is AMR involved in the community in that way? Do they have any community involvement with the fire departments?
We have involvement with them, but their involvement in their programs are probably better for them to answer that. But we work with them.
So you don't jointly
we have
education, okay.
Unless it's a special event at like a fair or something like that, where we're providing a show and tell together.
So what's your typical, and I asked this just because I haven't seen the data, what's your typical ambulance response time? I mean, I'm relatively new to this event, I guess.
Yes, just wait till our next meeting when we meet with AMS. That's one of the data.
Well, I'm curious how long you tie up a fire even on the scene.
We have the data from what was given on May 18th. That's aggregate for us all the way around. So I'm not going to provide different data than that. It's the same.
Okay, very good. That's all I have right now. I'll submit any additional questions to Leslie.
Thank you.
So I can mull this over.
Gentlemen, any of you have a question? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate you coming and doing your presentation. Well done. Some of the questions are going to be sound redundant, but for my own educational purposes, what has your experience regarding issues surrounding EMS response times? Since that's what this whole thing has been a basis around, is EMS response. I know that Jeff asked one of the same questions. I'm looking at your aggregate numbers. And if you can give me a quick education, pick up to dispatch. I've never heard that terminology before. Can you explain what that means?
So that's called processing. Pick up the phone, 911, what's your emergency, and then how long it takes them to dispatch the call to emergency services.
And I assume all of your staff are paid personnel. You have no volunteers?
No volunteers.
Okay. What is your feeling regarding quick response vehicles?
I feel like they have their place. They certainly can provide service when the situation arises where that you want to keep the fire engine available to respond to fires and send the most appropriate unit, which may be a QRV, to provide EMS. I understand the the QRV aspect in the presentation last month to be more associated with some community medicine versus just paramedic responding to the calls. I think that's appropriate in a system where there's a high call volume or when there's a reliability issue associated with that fire engine being held up for too long.
I asked that it's it's a sword coming back the other way now. QRVs, are they gonna, is your concept, are they going to be fighter manned personnel first and EMS second?
So I would expect that, I mean, you don't want to, we want to provide fire and EMS cross-trained firefighters so that they don't burn out on one or the other. So their ability is to provide QRV service in an EMS fashion and be committed to that when they're on that vehicle, but then also be able to rotate onto a fire engine so that you're getting them cross-trained and cross-serviced.
Okay, in your community outreach programs, and I'll refer to it that you wish, you perform AED, stop the bleed. Are we doing that kind of training for civilians?
So our community risk reduction development services, that their adult outreach program has the fall prevention, AED, CPR, stop the bleed. That's all being provided by them.
Thank you, that's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Reverend Linsby.
You provide service on 75, huge section through Sumter County. Would you talk about the positives and negatives that creates for the department?
Positives and negatives of the I-75 response?
Well, I would imagine that the greatest portion of it is EMS response, extrication and treatment of patients and prepping them for transport. So, I mean, it's a restricted roadway, and what kind of response do you send out? How do you determine how that response is? And what are the positives and negatives of having to provide that service for that stretch? I mean, it's a long stretch of road.
Yeah, so we provide I-75 service on I-75 30 miles from the 305 to the 335 mile marker. And you're right, it's limited access. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 access points. Most of our fire stations, many of our fire stations are within the proximity of that. So the positives and negatives of having to respond to the interstate is, you're right, with the limited access. It's a high volume, high speed thoroughfare. So our safety factors double, triple, and or even more. So for that reason, any motor vehicle accident up on the interstate that provide the service that we provide is 2 engines, and we prefer them to come closest unit, which typically means that they come from opposing directions. Those calls also get a battalion chief or a supervisor. Having the extra hands available on the interstate not only provides us with another truck to provide for more lighting and more blocking and more taking of the roadway, but also because it's limited access, if you need the extra help, you'd rather it be there and not need it than to need it and not be there. Some of the positives of our proximity to the interstate, each exit we have a station within a few miles of, or even less, and the practice and the experience they have up there, the pre-planning of the turnarounds, kind of how they respond up there, those ends up being the pros, but there really isn't a good way to say that there's a pro to having to get onto the interstate to work on a traffic crash, because they're usually pretty bad.
One of the departments I came from had the New York State Thruway bisecting the island that I lived on and that I worked on. And that bisection also had limited access to the New York State Thruway. How do you receive calls for I-75? Is it a passerby who may use a cell phone and make the phone call? Or do you have to wait for some type of authority, whether it's Florida Highway Patrol or Sheriff's Department, et cetera, to request Sumter Fire?
So I don't have the numbers as to what the frequencies of those are, but the ways we do get our 911 callers who are either first party involved in the wreck or have witnessed it. We also receive those alerts through FHP, which come to us through the PSAP and along with other emergency authorities. So it's really a combination of, I don't think that that one or the other precedes the other, precedes each other. Sometimes if we're gonna get them from both directions, we're gonna get it at the same time. But I don't really have data to show you right now to say one way or another, whether we're getting them from 911 or other requests.
From my own experience, I've learned that calls on those limited access highways, high-speed limited access highways, frequently are significantly longer than you might have at an EMS at a residence. And as a result, does that not compromise your ability to provide service throughout the rest of the county?
Well, if you had multiples at the same time, then it may. Those surge events can always happen. MCI, a pile up or a multi-casualty incident will tax the service in a surge type capacity. Our relationships with our mutual aid partners and our closest unit response relationship with the Villages Fire provides both the agencies the ability to have those extra hands automatically or whenever you request it. I will say that some of the improvements the Department of Transportation has done, specifically at I-75 and at Turnpike Interchange, those improvements and the median improvements to keep the crossovers down have dramatically decreased the severity of those accidents, but they still occur, and then we still have challenges when it's many vehicles. The other thing to think also that kind of helps slow our response, helps the wrong word to say slow response down, but big wreck means big traffic, and we still have to mitigate that traffic to get to the scene.
If you pull, let's say 2 trucks or 3 trucks at a time for a particular incident or more than one incident, do you have an automatic response from another department to come in and backfill your stations?
So there is automatic aid agreements with Hernando County, the south end. We have aid agreements with Citrus County upon request, and closest unit automatic aid with the Villages Public Safety. Typically at the county lines, those calls are coming in and going to multiple 911 centers. So we usually, if it's at the county line, end up with Marion County as well. But if we pull 2 or 3 of ours, upon request, we can get multiples, but in some areas it's all up.
Thank you.
Mr. Grink, do you have any questions? Okay. This group is only going to make a recommendation. The Board of County Commissioners will make a final decision. Have you had a chance to look at the options that have been proposed? Is there an option or 2 that you prefer?
My professional recommendations are embedded in those options. I was asked to provide that to the chain of command to Mr. Arnold. I've done so, and they're in there as representation. I'll reserve a personal opinion because I think that it can provide a bias, and quite honestly, that kind of conversation is for me to have with my district representative at the Board of County Commissioners as a citizen. But as a professional, there's a chain of command for me to follow, and that's been provided through that.
I understand. I would like to ask you one other question. Mr. Vogue, at the last meeting we had, I don't remember how we got on the topic, but he mentioned that it was taking upwards of a year to get an ambulance. If, let's just say, as a hypothetical, that the Board of County Commissioners asked your department to assume some responsibility for medical transport, how long would it take you to accomplish that?
Honestly, I don't know. I haven't researched how long it would take to buy an ambulance. I don't know how the acquisition process would go. Putting a lot of effort into researching one specific option and then having that direction change can be overwhelming. I'm aware of options that are out there, but there's also options that I'm not aware of. If that recommendation comes down and that's the task that we're handed, we'll make that research, we'll make that recommendation in the most fiscally responsible way possible.
Thank you. Any final questions?
I have a follow-up question. I was going through the data. I didn't see any, a lot of response times, turnout times, shoot times, but no on-scene times. Is that some data you can give me? I'm curious because it seems like at the heart of this conversation that we're having is the response times of AMR, the transporting agency, seems to be for the community's part of the issue. And obviously, when they come up here, we'll have lots of questions about, what their metrics are, how many units they're supposed to have on duty, how many they have on duty, et cetera, et cetera. But for I'm curious how their responses affect your department. How long are your units on scene? How long are they tied up unnecessarily? Although they're caring for a patient, and obviously all of us are looking for the best patient outcomes, but we have to look at what's going on. And that's really what I'm trying to drill down on is, are we setting the fire truck out there for 35 minutes when really it should be there for 15, or are they sitting there for 45 minutes? Do any of your trucks have transport capability? What if you got somebody that's having a stroke and AMR says, hey, it's going to be 40 minutes? Can we transport any of your trucks? Is that an option?
So multi-part question. Busy time for us, how long we're on scene. We provided that in a more aggregate in the May 18th proposal. That all that went to county administrators, assistant county administrators. That should be in there as far as time on scene or time aggregate. Busy time. No, none of our trucks are capable of transporting in a licensed manner. I mean, they're trucks, so people can ride in them. But to your scenario where we have a stroke patient and AMR is not available to transport it, then helicopter or another transportation agency.
Have you utilized any of the neighboring fire services that have the transport capability?
So the mutual aid for ambulance service is controlled by AMR. I do know that Hernando and Marion provide those services as well as Lake.
Yeah. Yes.
Chief, thank you so much for coming this evening. We appreciate your willingness to answer questions. We and the community at large thank you too.
Thank you.
And now we'll have Chief Kane and Deputy Chief Goodworth from the Village's Public Safety Department. Gentlemen.
Good evening, committee members. My name is Edmund Kane. I'm the Fire Chief with the Village's Department of Public Safety. Off to my left is Deputy Chief Jim Goodworth, who will also be presenting tonight. This evening, we're going to go over our presentation of our department with you and address any questions you may have at the end of the presentation. Our mission statement with our department, our core values are two of the most driving forces of our department. As you can see, the whole core values are listed up there. We'll begin with a brief overview of our commitment and governance to the villages and the community that we protect. About the villages itself. The villages is the largest single site real estate development in the United States, spanning 70 square miles plus. In addition, we provide protection to Lake, Sumter, and Marion counties, Leesburg, the city of Wildwood, and the city of Fruitland Park, and the town of Lady Lake. The villages is comprised of 16 community development districts, which oversee residential homes, 3 town squares, and over approximately 11 million square feet of commercial property, recreation, health properties throughout the villages. Our population is estimated over 134,000 residents spanning 3 counties, with a vast majority of our residents 55 and older. We have a daytime increase of our population of well over 10,000 people working within the villages. In addition, we have thousands of commuters traveling through the fire service area, locally and interlocally on the roadways, to include the Florida Turnpike. Estimated population density is 1,000 people per square mile, and there's approximately 65,000 rooftops within the villages. About the VCCDD. The Villages Community Development District is the governing board of the villages under Chapter 190 Florida Statute, Uniform Community Development District Act of 1980. The VCCDD is authorized to enter into local agreements with other government entities to provide services and facilities. We have a board of supervisors that handle all the governmental functions, much like a city, except for planning, zoning, and law enforcement. The district operates an all-in budget of over $350 million per year, and the district employs well over 1,000 part-time and full-time employees. The following slides are an overview of our department. Brief history of the Villages Department of Public Safety. In 1998, the Villages Community Development District proposed an improvement for public safety throughout the villages. This was to include fire protection, advanced life support, paramedic services to the citizens that we served. In October 6th of 1998, there was a special board meeting held by the Board of Supervisors, and it was approved unanimously to enter into an agreement and staff a fire department. This was accomplished in October of 1999. There was one station at that time located where Lake Sumter Landing is across the lake, basically at 466 and Morris Boulevard. At that time, the department consisted of one fire chief, 12 firefighter paramedics, and we responded to just over 1,000 calls in that first year of service and covered approximately 3 square miles. Today, the Villages Department of Public Safety is an all-hazards career department, protecting the largest single-site residential real estate development, the largest retirement community in the United States. The Villages is operating department of the Villages Community Development Service, our district. We have 9 fire stations throughout our response areas. The chart below shows you the number of each station, the location of the station, the ownership of the stations, and what counties they're located in. Our current fleet within the department, this is frontline apparatus. We have 5 engine companies, 5 non-transport rescues that are considered QRVs, 2 quick attack vehicles, which are also considered QRVs, 3 ladder trucks, 1 heavy rescue. All our frontline apparatus, all 15 of these apparatuses are certified by the state of Florida EMS office as paramedic response units in the department. They are non-transport units. We also have, in addition, 2 quick response battalion chiefs that work the villages within 9 stations. So we're going to give you an overview of each station. Station 40, which is located on Parr Drive next to the high school, consists of 1 95-foot tower truck, 1 engine, 1 rescue QRV. And as you can see off to the side, we list our staffing. The tower truck and the engine respond with 4. The rescue responds with 2 personnel. Station 41, which is located at 466 and Morris Boulevard across from Lake Sumter Landing, has 1 engine, 1 rescue QRV, and a boat that can be taken to any kind of water rescues within the boundaries of the district and outside of the district. Station 42, which is located in the Marion County portion of the villages, consists of a attack truck, which is also considered a QRV, mini pumper. Station 43, which is located in Orange Blossom Historical District of the Villages, has 1 battalion chief station there, a 75-foot ladder truck, A rescue QRV also is located at that station. Station 44, which is located on South Morris Boulevard, south of 466A, which also serves as the headquarters for the administrative staff, consists of one engine, one rescue QRV, our mobile air trailer, which is utilized throughout the district and in the Sumter County when requested. Station 45, which is located in the Brownwood area, has housed in that station a 100-foot ladder truck, a quick attack QRV, which is also can be utilized for brush services if needed. Station 46, which is located in Coleman off of 301, has one engine. Station 47, which is also located on South Morris Boulevard, south of State Road 44, consists of the staffing of one battalion chief, an engine. And finally, our last station, Station 51, which is located on Bonita Drive, consists of one heavy rescue, a rescue QRV, a utility tech unit, and also houses our TRT team that is registered with the state of Florida. This functions as our special ops station also. Licensure agreements. Interlocal agreement with Sumter County, Lake County, Marion County. Our COPCN, which is the certification of public conveyance and necessity, which is required by the state EMS office. We are licensed with Sumter County, Lake County, and Marion County to provide ALS non-transport services to the residents of those communities. As I stated earlier, our licensure is through the state of Florida for EMS. We have several agreements in place for services that we provide through all those areas. Our response zones. At this present time, we cover over 90 square miles of the villages and outside of the villages. If you look at the map, the green areas are all our property within the villages. The purple areas that you see, some within the villages, some outside of the villages, are contracted with Sumter County to provide both advanced life support and fire suppression. If you look off to the map on the very top right, that blue area is actually the area of Lady Lake that we cover. In addition, if you come down further on the map, you'll see a green area at the center of the map to the right. This is the coverage area for the city of Fruitland Park that we provide within the villages. And down at the bottom of the map, you will see the blue area. This is the future growth of the villages within the boundaries of the city of Leesburg. As I stated earlier, the purple areas surrounding the villages are areas that we provide coverage to with Sumter County on a contractual basis. We do utilize the closest unit response within Sumter County. This is done by the dispatch center with their CAD system. This searches out the location of the call, the appropriate apparatus, and pages those units. So either from the villages or Sumter County, both departments could be responding together to structure fires, auto accidents, etc. The next slide is showing the growth we've experienced each year over our service areas throughout the villages. Our staffing is consistent of 150 firefighters, 6 battalion chiefs, 16 administrative personnel. The staffing for the field group is broken down into 3 different areas or 3 different shifts. Each shift consists of 2 battalion chiefs, 50 firefighter personnel. Our ratio, we operate on a 24-hour shift with 48 hours off. Our ratio of paramedics is 61% paramedics to 39 EMTs in the department. We often get asked the question of why, when I have a medical emergency, does the big red truck show up to my house? All our frontline VPS apparatus are staffed with firefighters, EMTs, and paramedics. with advanced training, train them in this multiple disciplines, rapid treatment and patient care. We're able to mitigate hazards while delivering patient care at the same time. Critical tasking. The stations are strategically located throughout the district, and our average age within the village is, according to the previous census, is 70+ years old. The next slide that we will talk about is the ISO rating, the Insurance Service Office rating. This is a mandatory rating that is done by the insurance group. They are rating your department from anywhere from a 10 to a 1. I will tell you, depending on the rating, this affects your insurance rates, whether on commercial or residential structures. A 1 is basically the highest rating you can obtain with the largest decrease in your insurance. Countrywide or nationwide, the village's Department of Public Safety is one of 1,789 departments in the country with a Class 2 rating. In the state of Florida, we're one of 119 departments in Florida. Currently, we are working on our accreditation status. We're going through the accreditation with the Commission of Fire Accreditation International. Please understand that this is a voluntary certification that we are working on diligently. As I stated earlier, the ISO rating is a mandatory rating that is done. So at this time, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Chief Goodworth. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Kane. I'd like to talk a little bit about in some areas such as our budget and funding, our response data, and some of the services and programs that our department provides. In our current fiscal year 2021 funding sources, there are several sources we get our funding from, including amenity fees. We get a portion of the amenity fees dedicated to public safety. Those amenity fees are assessed for each rooftop within the villages. There's a fire assessment fee that's assessed for each building within Sumter County, Lake County, Lady Lake. That is $124 per building. We have contractual agreements with the city of Fruitland Park to provide fire and EMS services. We have some miscellaneous revenue, which is generated through CPR classes and for us covering specialty dedicated units to cover special details and events. In addition, this year we have the SAFER grant, and if I can just spend a moment explaining. The SAFER grant, it's a federal grant that was provided through FEMA. The purpose of the SAFER grant was created to provide funding directly to fire departments to increase their frontline firefighter staff. The purpose of it is to help departments their ability to meet the National Fire Protection Association Standard 1710, which deals with staffing and response and operational standards and guidelines. We were recently awarded the grant this year that allowed us to hire 27 additional firefighters to help us meet that standard of NFPA 1710. This SAFER grant this year was unique. Usually it's a matching type grant. However, because of the COVID, the grant that we were awarded pays 100% funding for personnel services to include salary and benefits for a period of 3 years. On the 4th year, that cost is the responsibility of the department. The following slide is a breakdown of those funding sources I had just mentioned. As you can see, the majority of our funding, approximately 73% of our funding, is through Sumter County, through their general fund and fire assessment fees, with the other breakdown of our additional funding resources, which equals our total budget. As I mentioned, our fire assessment and fire amenity fees are based off of rooftops. This just is a breakdown of the number of rooftops within our service areas. And we're totaling 67,000 and growing. A very high overview of our budget, our expenses. They are broken down. Approximately 70% of our expenditure budget is due to personnel costs and salaries and benefits. As like most departments and other organizations, your personnel costs are the most highest expense. 20% of those expenses are based off of operational supplies and operating, and 10% being capital, with capital equipment referring to stations, apparatus, replacements, and so forth. The services that public safety provides: fire suppression. We do prevention of spreading and extinguishment of all fires involving but not limited to structure fires, vehicle fires, machinery, equipment, and wildland interface fires. One of the data sets that we do collect, which is also we're required to report to the National Fire Database, is the incident dollar loss versus dollar saved. If I may take a moment to explain that. The incident dollar loss is based on, for all buildings that sustain damage due to fire. When we arrive on scene, after we're done with the call, we inject this information into our report. We take the pre-incident value of that structure. For example, if the pre-incident value of the structure is $100,000, there was 50% damage to that structure. We record as we saved 50,000 and we lost dollar loss of 50,000. What does this tell us? Well, when we look at this and analyze this, as you can see, our losses are much less than our saved, and that's a good thing. What that's telling us is that we're arriving on scene quickly, we're putting water on the fire quickly, and we're stopping that fire in the room of origin and preventing further damage. Also, this information helps us to define the magnitude of the fire problem within our community, and it also helps leaders in determining what they want to spend on protecting the assets in their community. As you know, in the villages, just based on median home value and number of rooftops, we have over $20 billion in residential property that we are protecting, not including the billions upon billions of dollars of commercial property that we protect each and every day. Additional services, EMS services, like Sumter County, we provide advanced life support, non-transport EMS. Emergency medical services is one of our highest incident types that we respond to. That accounts to approximately 70% of our total responses is to EMS calls. We also provide technical rescue. We are a type 1 heavy technical rescue team that is recognized by the state. Our team members are specialized in high rope rescue, vehicle rescue, confined space, trench collapse, and structural collapse. Our team is not only a local asset, but we are a state and regional asset if needed and requested for mutual aid in other areas. Hazmat, we respond, our hazardous materials response. Our department is trained to operations level. Basically, as Chief Hansen was explaining a little bit on his presentation, operation level is our personnel are trained to have the knowledge to identify the hazard and basically do defensive tactics. If it's a scene that requires more than that to a technician level, we rely on Sumter, Marion, or Lake, who has those specialized technician levels on their team to to come in and assist us. Some additional programs that we offer that's unique to our department is the neighborhood AED groups or Neighbors Saving Neighbors program. This is a very, very valuable and important program to our department, and it has a very, very positive impact, and we see the impact and measure that impact. We have over 242 neighborhood AED groups, which consist of over 5,000 responders who are certified and trained in CPR and how to use an AED. We see the positive impact because historically, since we've started these programs, we have a higher cardiac survival rate than the national average consistently year after year. Our survival rate for 2019 and 20 was over 15%. Our training division ensures that all our personnel remain competent in both fire and EMS medical training and keep up all their continuing education. Our fire prevention division, they're part of our community risk reduction. That division is responsible for fire pre-plans, ensuring that new construction plans are reviewed for fire code compliance. Inspections, everything from existing buildings to new buildings, and the responsibility of those buildings within the villages. In addition to the inspections and plan reviews, that division also goes out and does public education events. They work closely with the charter school. During fire prevention week, we go in, we teach them EDIF drills and other fire safety programs. Not only just the schools, to various clubs. As you know, we have many, many clubs throughout the community that we're asked to give presentations on our department. Another very, very popular program that is near and dear to our hearts is the smoke detector program. As part of our risk reduction program, we looked at how can we prevent a high incidence of falls within our community. Because of our age demographics, we do have a high incidence of losing balance, falling down. The smoke detector program, one works by, they can call us to change their batteries or replace a new smoke detector. The resident is required to buy their own batteries, to buy the detector, but rather than them getting up and climbing on a ladder, we ask they call us, we'll come out and we'll change that. It's no cost to them. And it does two things. It ensures that, number one, that they're staying safer. Number two, that every home that we go in, we're ensured that it has a working smoke detector and carbon monoxide detector. It's a very busy program. We do approximately average about 30 service calls a day for that. We also provide car seat installation. We have many of our personnel that have been certified through the National Highway Traffic Administration to properly and safely install car seats. That's popular during the summer months when grandchildren are coming down visiting their grandparents, and we can ensure that they can come by the station and we will go ahead and install that seat, make sure it's safely installed. In addition, we have emergency management division. Our emergency management specialist is a liaison to the county emergency management for Sumter, Lake, and Marion County, because, as you know, we're a unique department that operates out of 3 different counties. They're also help coordinate the community emergency response team program within the villages, which is a very, very large program that does a super great benefit to our community. And they also assist with CPR and AED first aid training to residents, public, and the district of the over 1,000 district employees. The next slide is just showing, as part of our strategic plan, we held an external stakeholders group meeting, and that group was comprised of residents and business owners within our response area. And The idea of the meeting was to get a point of view from our customer. What was important to them? We invited them for a half day. We did a SWOT analysis of the department. In addition, we asked them, we ranked all of our services and we asked each of them to please prioritize what is most important to you. Are we meeting their needs? The results of that survey showed overwhelmingly that EMS was one of the highest priorities that our residents of that group said was important to them. Next, I'd like to review some incident response data. Like Chief Hansen was saying, when we analyze our response times, we look at a total response time, which is based on the call processing, it's based on turnout time, it's based on travel time. So how do we measure our performance levels? Well, in the packet, I have included, for purposes of the committee, I've included both our average and our fractile method of response times. I think it's important that you, for those of you historically have heard about our department, it's reported on an average response. So average, and also the focus has always been to with the community of less than 5 minutes. That still holds true today. Our average response travel time door to door is under 5 minutes. However, like Chief Hansen was saying with accreditation, there's a different way that we report and document our response times, and that's using a fractile method. It gives you a clearer and better picture of your true performance. We use the 90 percentile, which means we look at 90% of our responses to determine our overall response time. Just to go back, in 2018, our total number of emergency calls, we were at 13,300. This is emergency calls throughout our entire response area, not just within the villages. So this could be outside areas into Sumter County, Marion, and Lake. 2018, our response area consisted of approximately 63 square miles. We had 130 personnel. In 2019, our total response time, 90 percentile, 824, average 551. We increased by slightly up to 70 square miles. Our personnel, 145. And our total responses was 14,299. In 2020, we increased up to almost 90 square miles. We did add an additional station down in the Coleman to cover Finney area. We had 145 personnel with an average total response time of 556 and a total response time fractile of 90% of 843. 21 to date, we remained at 9 stations. Our mileage of response area remained pretty much the same. Number of personnel, as you can see, jumped to 172, and this was secondary to the 27 safer grant positions. Next slide is showing our incident types. Going from the left, the first column is showing our structure fires for each of the aggregate 4 years, 4.5 years. The second blue column represents our EMS and rescue type calls. As I had previously stated, that's our highest incident type, and it covers approximately about 70% of our total call volume. The purple column is our service call. These are mostly related to our smoke detector. These could be anything from animal calls. We get ducks in the drain, cats in a tree, to smoke odors. We truly do ducks in a drain quite often. The green column is our good intent, false alarm. They include any calls that we are started and maybe canceled en route, which happens quite often. Or we arrive on scene and it end up being a false alarm. And our miscellaneous, a lot of it relates to severe weather type incidents. The next graph is a heat map, and it's depicting our incident density calls from 2018 to 2021. The symbols you see on the map represent the locations of our stations. The shaded areas are the further shaded red areas indicate that we have a higher incident of call volume. And it really kind of gives us an idea, are our stations strategically located in the right place where we're hitting the most volume of calls? This slide is going over where our incident location trends. It's broken down into our highest number of incidents are located within the villages of Sumter. We also broke it down in the villages of Marion, Lake, Fruitland Park, Sumter, Lake, and Marion. As you can see, in 2017, we began the closest unit response between us and Sumter County Fire Rescue. And we have had an increase in our Sumter County response, because as with the closest unit response, Sumter County can come in to assist us, and we can go out depending on who's ever closest to that call. But they may come into the villages, we may go out of the villages. Sorry. Oh. The next slide is showing, one of the committee members was asking about dedicated time sets. So this is basically showing back the last 9 months. We've recorded and showing that what our scene times are, or busy times, as Chief referred to it, that we are on scene for an EMS emergency call. As you can see, beginning from December, we have had an increase in the number of times that are dedicated seat times of 20 minutes or longer. As Chief Hansen was saying, the impact on the department with that increased busy times or dedicated times is that unit is committed for the entire time, unavailable for other calls that may come in. That unit is dedicated until we can turn over the patient to the ambulance. As part of our response time data analysis, we do look at our trend year over year. Our call volume per year, you can see we had a pretty drastic decrease in 2020, and this was a direct result of the pandemic. With the shutdown, our responses to motor vehicle accidents was non-existent. Our falls, people out in public, people sheltered in, so we could see a pretty significant reduction in calls. Our call processing trend has been staying pretty steady over the last, since 2018. Our turnout time trend, we're able to make a decrease in that, and that was just through some training, some working with our guys, getting them out to the truck as quick as possible from the time they're notified to get out of the station. I apologize with my. So looking at our total response time trend, again, we are, for our total response time is 20%, and we are at a average at 607. So at this time, I'd like to turn it back to Chief Kane for the conclusion of the presentation. Thank you.
So in closing, to the EMS committee, thank you for your time with us this evening, allowing us to proudly present our department to you. Over the past 20 years, we have served our community during these times. We have responded to the growth and the unique makeup of the villages in our community. The villages is going to continue to grow at a rapid pace, and our department is going to parallel this growth. Our commitment to the community, the public we serve, will continue as it has for over the last 2 decades. At this time, if you have any questions, we'll be more than happy to answer them.
Gentlemen, questions?
Yes.
Please.
Chief, thank you. I'm looking at a map that I didn't see in the presentation. I'm not even sure how I came about this, but anyway, I got it. It's a density map with your stations laid out within that density area.
Yes, sir.
There are 9 out of the 15 stations that lie within the, actually, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, actually 7 of those are really in the high density area. And I noticed that in your discussion, you used the term quick response vehicle a lot. I think your definition and mine might be millenniums apart, but because I'm assuming that that red pickup truck that came to my house for yours truly was part of your minimum manning for that station. Is that true?
The quick attacks that you're referring to, the small pickup trucks or the squad-looking trucks of the newer version,
Correct.
there are 2 personnel on that apparatus, one of which is a paramedic. We have a goal now that we're working at for Station 40 and Station 43 to increase to 2 paramedics on those particular apparatus. There is still an engine at those stations or an aerial device that has a staffing of 4. And both of those apparatus, whether it's a quick QRV, rescue, the little squad, whatever you would like to call it, and the engine are all paramedic units. So just a little further, more for you, the aerial devices and the engines have a lieutenant, and they are certified as a paramedic. And there are other paramedics on those particular apparatuses, depending on the staffing that day. But every one of the units that responds is a paramedic equipped unit within the system.
Oh, I'm not questioning the level of care at all. I'm just more concerned about the fact that they are part of that station's minimum manning for the engine. They're part of that process.
The engine is staffed with 4 personnel. The smaller vehicles are staffed with 2 personnel. The aerial devices are also staffed with 4 personnel.
Okay, in this map, I'm looking at the 7, X7. I don't have station numbers, so I can't associate that with the staffing issue, but do you do anything special in terms of medical staffing within these areas, since they appear to be the high density? I'm assuming they're high volume areas as well.
That's where our QRVs are located, so they fill in there. And as I stated earlier, both the QRVs and the engines are all paramedic equipped and staffed as paramedic units in the system.
I realize it's fairly soon after the program has been implemented, but have you seen any difference with the introduction of Nurse Navigator into the system? Has that helped in any way in terms of response, or is this too early to tell?
To be quite honest with you, it's too early to tell. It does, I can tell you it does not occur, but it's still too early to see how that program's working in the system.
Just bear with me 1 second here. And I'm assuming that in these areas, you have automatic backfill to areas that are, in terms of the deputy chief's explanation of having an engine on scene or a quick response vehicle, waiting for an EMS unit to come out of the hospital in order to transport. I'm assuming that there is a backfill process for that unit that's being held at that scene. Not just fire, but also for medical as well.
We take the smaller QRVs and we actually move them from one station to another on a regular basis. The most pertinent one is probably a TAC 42 up in the Marion section. They come down to Station 43's area to fill in those areas.
And I guess my last question, I don't want to dictate the whole evening, but I guess my question becomes is, with Marion County Fire providing EMS transport, is it why hasn't the villages broached that issue about becoming a transport service?
The ability for a fire department to function as a paramedic unit, non-transport, is controlled by the county. In addition, for a transport unit, that is also controlled by the counties. So basically, a fire department cannot go out and buy an ambulance and attempt to put it on the road to transport people or patients, but that is the controlling factor of the county administration for each county within Florida.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that.
Marion County has a closed system, they don't let anybody transport the Marion Fire.
I'm aware of that.
Mr. Green?
I have no questions. I have some questions. I'm really interested in this multiple stations outside of the county and the funding of those stations. The Lady Lake County, the Lady Lake Station is outside of Sumter County, correct?
Correct.
And that seems to be in one of the hot, on your heat map, one of the high volume stations. Yet your funding you indicated was by rooftop.
Yes.
So they had 5,807 rooftops, and that averaged out to about $186 per facility. Does that cover the cost of that station? Where do you get your tax dollars, in other words, for that station? Because it obviously takes more than $300,000 to staff a station. That's the cost of a nurse for 1 year, like on a rescue.
Right, it's based on amenity fees and also and I showed you in our chart, if I'll find it, the breakdown of their, what Lady Lake pays.
Right.
The revenue portion.
So is that $1 million, 1,084,000, is that revenue from these additional fire fees that are charged to residents in the Lady Lake area?
It's
Or
based,
does the county also supplement that, Lake County?
no, they do not. They do not supplement Lake.
So Lady Lake County, that $1 million comes strictly from those 5,800 homes?
Yes. Fire assessment fees and amenity fees.
Those people gotta be a little upset, it's $9 there, isn't it? So the same thing with Fruitland Park and Marion County, they're all funded.
Fruitland Park is done on a contractual agreement with an annual increase related to the CPI.
Okay. And then your budget for Sumter County is from the Sumter County General Fund for the rest of the villages?
It's made up of fire assessment fees supplemented through the general fund.
Okay. And then just for my clarity, and I want to make sure I understand, you don't directly report to the county administrator, you directly report to a board, chairman of the board for the VCCD?
We actually report to Mr. Bear, Richard Bear, who's the administrator for the villages.
Okay. The data you have on your dedicated on scene time, those are percentages up the left side, is that correct?
Number of calls.
Number of
Number
calls.
of times.
You don't commingle any of that data, so in other words, if there's somebody that says, if you have a 20-minute or 25-minute response time, you don't include the 10 minutes in that as well? When you're running.
No, that's just specifically timed to
Okay.
after arrival on scene.
Perfect, okay. So obviously, we have a response time issue here. It seems like for the ambulances, if we're spending 40 minutes on the scene. What's your take on that? How's that impacted your department?
The biggest impact that we've had on the department, as you noted, is the tying up of our units. We have been able to offset that by moving trucks to fill in the holes.
So you operate a system status where,
I wouldn't call it system status, but yes, we do move the units around depending on the call volume.
when your QRVs respond, do they respond by themselves, or is it dependent on the severity of
It
the call?
depends on the nature of the call.
So somebody has a chest pain, you could get just a QRV versus somebody that comes in as a cardiac arrest and trying to get a QRV.
The cardiac arrest would normally get a QRV depending on the location, an engine company and a battalion chief are assigned to those incidences. In addition, just to let you know, our battalion chiefs are paramedics. That's part of their requirements to be in that position, so that there is medical control by a supervisor on large scenes.
Your battalion chiefs are medical control?
They oversee the operations as an incident commander. They're not medical control. We answer to the University of Florida for medical control.
Do you have a preference on the 10 options? Just call it what it is. It's what you're talking about.
Yes, sir, I will. There are 10 options in front of you. 5 of those options are for removal of the village's Department of Public Safety. The responses have been decreased for the fire departments. I would go with option 9. And that would have to be a joint venture between both the villages and Sumter County as far as fire-based transport within the county.
Good, thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate your presentation. I may have some additional questions I submitted in writing through Leslie for both departments. Fortunately, I was a little remiss and didn't give all my data before I came in tonight.
I have one question, gentlemen, and this is purely for personal education. Talk about rooftops. My understanding is that a rooftop is not a rooftop, is not a rooftop. But a house is a rooftop, correct?
Yes, sir.
Is Publix at Colony Plaza a rooftop?
Yes, sir.
Is, say, a lawn on 466, 3 stories and a whole bunch of 1,000 feet under roof, is that a rooftop?
Yes, sir.
You know, like, this gets interesting because when you talk about the fire fees being the same per rooftop, it seems like it ought to be based on square footage under roofs and the number of people in the facility, especially in assisted living facility. That's my personal opinion. That's not what we're here for. Thank you for that. Any final questions?
This countywide response information that you have been referred to in the packet, is it the average countywide total busy time in 90th percentile an hour and 20 minutes? Is that correct?
I'm remiss to see the exact same thing you're looking at, which
Shows the countywide average is 35 minutes.
so county, you talk about countywide average 35 minutes and 90th percentile 1 minute and 20.
Is that the 1 minute 20 or 1 hour 20?
1 hour 20:59. That's a 90th percentile countywide, is my understanding.
And that's all calls, not just EMS.
All fire and emergency medical services calls.
So we're going to hear from AMR next week.
That's going to be discussed very shortly.
Other questions?
Any no other questions, gentlemen? I want to thank you for coming. As I mentioned, Chief Hansen, we appreciate what you do for our communities, and it's been very educational. Thank you for taking your time to do this, and I'm sure we took you away from what you would rather be doing when you all put this material together, so thanks for that too. Now, I think we move into public forum. This is the part where members of the public are welcome to get up and take up to 5 minutes to speak to us. And is there anybody interested in doing so? Yes, sir. Please.
Hello, committee members. My name is Scott Lepper. I am the founder and CEO of Florida Telehealth. Every day since May of 2015, I have been reducing 911 calls and improving the response times of EMS all across the country. I say that with a little bit of embellishment, but for impact. In 2015, I started my company. At that time, I was living in Virginia Beach. I was a volunteer EMT with Virginia Beach Rescue. I served on the ambulance-based rescue team and the water-based rescue team. In 2013, 2014, it became evident nationwide that EMS all across the country was having an overload of 911 calls, which was slowing response times. It was a national problem, just like right now. This is Chief Hansen said, this is a national problem, it's just not local. Well, I'm a little bit of an entrepreneur. So I was serving on the rescue team and I thought, how can we reduce 911 calls? One thing led to another, and I created the Rescue Touch medical alert system. It looks like a lot of the other ones we've all seen. Our parents have had them, maybe some of us have them, right? Ours is different. Most people don't want paramedics and firefighters showing up at their door unless it is a life circumstances, right? They'd rather have a device call a family member or a neighbor is a better response so that they're not influenced to go to the hospital, spend the night in the hospital, get checked out. This device was our first technology. I can program this to call 5 family members, neighbors, volunteer assist vehicles, nurses who take care of me. So imagine I'm older, I'm 30, 40, 50 years older than I am right now. You guys are my 5 sons or you're my 5 neighbors, however you want to look at it. I fall off the porch, I go down, I need help. I don't have my cell phone with me. Or I do have my cell phone with me. Who am I gonna call? I'm gonna call 911. But what if I don't need 911? What if I can push this and my 5 sons all get the alert? Then you guys can say, hey, Dad, what's going on? I fell off the porch again. Can you come over and help me out? Yeah, I'll be right over. That just reduced those 911 calls for that county by 1 that day, which improved every response time on every other call. So that's how the company started. We're now introducing our telehealth watch. It has the same technology built in. It also has heart rate monitor, also has step monitor. These technologies are coming that allow seniors to live alone, are a big problem, but not the only problem, to be better in touch with their doctors, which will reduce 911 calls, to send an alert out to neighbors, family members, volunteer assist, non-emergency assist vehicles. All that will reduce 911 calls here in Sumter County. That will significantly reduce the response times, and that's why we're here today. The other aspect, so that's the first aspect I wanted to offer my experience and my knowledge to the board on this matter. The second one is that the very residents that call 911 are themselves a big part of the problem. 911 is not supposed to be called for everything. It's not supposed to be your healthcare answer. Nationwide, people abuse it. Every firefighter in here knows it. Every EMT in here knows it. It is part of the business. We all know it. I moved to the Villages 4 years ago from Virginia Beach. And I thought, I bet that problem is even bigger here because retirees move down. They have their doctors back in Michigan, New Jersey, and they don't want to share all their healthcare information with a new doctor in Florida. They just rather be able to say, hey, I've got my doctor back home. So they keep that doctor back home. There's a lot of insurance plans that they have back home that don't transfer down to Florida, so they don't transfer their insurance to Florida. They also hear about the bad reputation that Florida has for healthcare for seniors, so they don't put a lot of lot of trust in that. So what do? They do not align with the healthcare industry.
So I'm sorry, your time is up.
Okay, thank you. Those are the two aspects I want to share with you. I'm available to meet with you guys at another time. I got some information I brought about me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Others, yes, sir.
My name's Ray Bidwell. I live at 1575 Hartsville Trail in the village of Sunset Point. And I want to say thank you for you guys taking on this job. It's a huge job and we really appreciate it. And I just wanted to let you guys know from a resident's point of view that the most critical thing is response time. When I had to call them, they were at my house while I was still talking to 911 on the phone, and the QRV pulled up in front of my house. So that's the most important thing for the residents of the villages. And since we're all older, we have a much higher need for medical response than you would see in a normal population. So that's just what I want to say. But thank you guys. You're taking on a big job.
Thank you, sir. Any others who'd like to make a comment? If not, we'll move on to the rest of the agenda. First item remaining is we each have a copy of the minutes from our June 9th meeting. Do we hear a motion to approve them?
Second.
The attorney, I just want to note there is a typographical error in the summary of my remarks, and it needs a correction. It's the use of the word appraised versus apprised. So if you were going to approve, if you could approve it subject to that change, please.
Okay, second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you. Okay, now, two things that I want to do. First is I want to go over a proposed calendar of the remaining meetings. I mean, we have a short time in which to get stuff done. So if you would take one and pass it down. I have one here. I'll leave some others over here. So what I've suggested is, and obviously these are open to significant discussion. We have AMR scheduled next week, not next week, 2 days from now, our next meeting by themselves. I'm proposing for the fourth meeting, we get Dr. Fitzpatrick and representing himself and UF Health down here, and then get county staff to come back and go over the options briefly with us so we know we're comfortable with what each of them is and can talk clearly about them as we're making decisions. I also think there might be some other options that somebody on this committee has, or some people. I think we ought to be able to discuss those at that same meeting. Are you all comfortable with that? Sure. Okay. I'm proposing that meeting 5, we discuss the options between us, have a good serious discussion, what we like, what we don't like, all of that. And then at the meeting after that, select the option we are going to recommend to the Board of County Commissioners. I'm assuming that the report should be written. Would you say that that's?
Well, you would prepare your recommendation for submission to the board at their meeting.
Right, but I assume that would be a written recommendation?
Yes.
Okay, so we can, meeting 7, we can put a draft report together. I'll be prepared to come in with something for everyone to look at. And then meeting 8, finalize our recommendation and the report. And then on the 12th, I would hope all of you will be attending the BOCC meeting. I suspect there might be some questions that we'll have to answer, just like we're asking folks. For next week, when AMR, I'm sorry, I keep saying next week, I mean next meeting. AMR is up.
I will be reaching out to them to arrange to see if they have a representative that will be available. And so it might be subjected to change between AMR and Dr. Fitzpatrick. So we'll see how the schedule pans out.
Okay, if we do that, I think we're gonna need a whole meeting for AMR. Perhaps we could just switch meeting 4 with meeting 3. But when AMR is up, I would like to suggest that we have, I'm certain there are gonna be folks from regional, if not national level here, because of their interest in this. But I would also like to make sure that we have a local representative who will be more attuned to what's going on every day and can answer questions more easily than somebody who's not involved on a day-to-day basis. Are we comfortable with that? Are there any changes anybody would like to make?
No, I would like to ask, looked over the contract from AMR along with the amendments. And in the original contract, item 21, items 1 and 2, ambulance service zones is referenced, and the prescribed number of ALS units or ambulances are assigned to in Sumter County on a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week basis. I don't see those in this document, any of these documents that we got.
Well, that gets us to my next thing. We were each asked to put together a list of questions. It's hardly all of them. But the bulk of these are for AMR. Pass those down, please. And one of them, let's see. We know what they're supposed to have, but I've asked a question here about how are ambulance staffing patterns generated and scheduled. If there is a more specific question that you would like to ask, when is the latest somebody could get their questions into you, Mrs. Smith?
As soon as possible.
Okay. So if you have a question and you don't see it asked on here.
Oh, I don't see it.
So, and I'll put these, you have a copy of these? Okay, I'll put these here as well since it's public information. So we have an agenda for the remaining meetings with potentially two meetings being swapped around. Is there anything else for the good of the order?
No, I'm good.
Yes, I'd like to, yeah.
Go ahead.
So I have brand management's a big thing. And apparently the developer with the Villages brand is, and this is where I'm struggling with trying to understand. We're trying to look at this as a county-wide, how do we improve patient outcomes for everybody in this county? I understand the Villages wants to retain their own fire department. Is there a way, and this is something for us, the board to talk about, is there a way to keep the Villages Fire Department and Sumter Fire Rescue or the Sumter County Fire Department, is there a way to bring them together but keep them separate? I mean, Chief, you know this better than anybody probably. These are things I'm just bouncing around in my head, trying to understand. I know it seems like there's a huge variance in the services that are offered. Obviously, the Villages is a very robust, fire department, and they offer a lot of services that other parts of the county don't receive. And, you just don't have the funding for it. I get that. So, you have to look at funding. And, for me, it's a bigger picture than just.
Well, I think that's as we move forward, we're going to look at all these aspects. You are looking at funding. You can identify that both departments have shared their annual budgets, and they are significantly different, but they're providing significantly different services. And so I think that's one of the pieces that we're going to be looking at here. Granted, we're supposed to be specifically looking at the EMS side, but we are identified as the fire and EMS ad hoc. So we're going to look at all those services. And in this process, we have to decide the services that one current entity is providing, is that something that the entire county should be privy to? And if so, that could be part of our recommendation. So as we move forward, I think we're going to look at all those aspects: funding, services, and then we're looking at the transport, agency coming up, and we're looking at those different options. We've been given 10 different options to look at. I think there may be a couple others that we may synthesize as we move forward. When you're asking the question about retaining the two departments, that keeping them separate, you run into some issues with state statutes and governance and things of that nature. So those are questions that we can ask as we move through this over the next couple of weeks. Those may be some of the questions that we could look at discussing or asking the county administrator to provide feedback on.
Thank you.
Anything else? Anybody have anything else they'd like to say? Or ask?
I'm looking forward to the University of Florida. I think one of those options with the University of Florida option, that's a huge brand, when you deal with brand management, it becomes a real problem. When you start wanting to tag somebody's brand on the side of an ambulance, I think that's gonna be a real question for us to look at. The other part of this is, I don't know if everybody in this committee is aware that, University of Florida, I hear a lot in the community, not, knowing that you're rid of AMR, I'm seeing that in these media clips and stuff, and they have horrible response times, blah, 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 and obviously we're gonna talk to them and find out, give them a fair opportunity. But then if you look at that one proposal from University of Florida, they're actually looking at contract an outside vendor to do their services. Sure, and they do with the helicopter, they use MedTrans, which is owned by GMR, which is who AMR is.
But we also have to remember that the University of Florida does not manage any of the local transport services or fire departments, except the one on their own campus.
I believe that was one of the proposals that they would manage. Well, then you get.
Like Lynn said, we're gonna have a lot to chew on.
If I can, Mr. Chairman. I'd like moving forward, this discussion is taking place, as it was pointed out earlier, is not unique to Florida. It's been countrywide, it's been going on for decades. Nothing's changed. The catalyst to any of these is how fast can a unit release their patient to get back into their catchment area to provide the service that they need. That's what we're talking about here. I am not embracing the fact of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I'm not going to get I just want to move forward. I want to make sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, that we don't, number one, as just pointed out at our last meeting, we don't put people out of work. We're not here to put people out of work. God only knows there's enough people out there not working now. We don't need to add to that. I think the service that provided doesn't matter if it's by AMR, it doesn't matter if it's by a hospital system, it doesn't really matter. It's the matter of how the patient is unloaded and released and the unit is put back into service. We're not going to get an ambulance in every corner. That's not going to happen. We do want the service provided, absolutely. We do want our response times to reflect our intent, absolutely. But I think we all have to look at this in a very realistic sense, with everything that we're going to project where we want to maintain response time. I'm all for that. I live in the villages. I'm not getting any younger. But the reality to it is we can't have an ambulance in every corner. FD's response time, sure, they've got 15 stations. So we'll talk and see what AMR comes up with the next 2 weeks. I'm anxious to hear what their proposal is.
I think also some of the challenges that AMR is having, because I know we have a contract, and the concern is maybe that they're not meeting all levels of the contract. So the challenges that they may be having, I want us to realize, if they're having those challenges as a private entity, exactly, UF could have those same challenges. villages and or Sumter Fire can have those same challenges. So, coming up with a recommendation to change something or to fix, we also have to realize what are those current challenges that the current agencies are facing. Are we not going to face those in the future? So we need to kind of listen to what they have to say to us and take those into consideration as we make our future proposals.
I guess I missed the boat. I should have asked a question to the chiefs. We border Marion County. Marion County is a transport fire department. What discussions have taken place with them in terms of why aren't we doing that? And what obstacles have they faced? I mean, I read a lot of articles online, this wall time issue. At one point, the county was going to get involved and start penalizing the health system for their lack of response to getting their units out the door. Where's all that gone to? I don't see anything happen out of it. I haven't heard any more about it. This article is less than 10 months old.
I will tell you from personal experience that Marion County suffers a lot of the same challenges there. They go what they call single 40, frequently low volume of rescues. I attend meetings on a regular basis with the chief and the EMPC, their council up there, the same as we do in Hillsborough County with the Emergency Medical Planning Council. So this challenge of offloading patients rapidly at a hospital is not unique to Sumter County, to the villages. This is a nationwide issue. And, the theory, I've heard some people throw around the idea of penalizing a hospital. You can't financially impact a hospital unless you just quit taking patients there. And what you're going to do is, what I think needs, one of the things we need to entertain is an EMS activated bypass. And we do that, they do this in Hillsborough County very effectively because hospitals, and I work for one, and I will tell you that if my volume through the door by EMS drops, I'm alarmed. That's a metric that I got a problem with. I'm losing patients, I'm losing revenue. And so, in other counties, they have EMS activated bypasses where the hospitals don't want to go on bypass, but the EMS agencies all contact each other and say, okay, we're going to put them on bypass. We have units waiting 20 minutes. I run metrics on that regularly for 6 counties that I operate an ambulance service in. And I will tell you that the way you impact the hospital is by bypassing. You cut their money off at their needs. The thought that if you're with the University of Florida and the hospital is owned by the University of Florida, the thought that they will offload you quicker is a complete fallacy. Because in fact, they'll make you wait longer because you're part of their system.
One of the challenges with that is when you do not have a myriad of hospitals that you can bypass for,
Absolutely.
which is one of the issues here for Sumter County. We don't have that luxury.
No.
The other question regarding why have the fire chiefs talk to Marion and see how they're doing. I think that was already explained earlier, that it's the county commission's decision whether the county is a transport provider or not. So that would be above both of the fire chiefs' purview. But now we're entertaining this. See.
The issue of on-scene times that we've been talking about, the delay, the delays that we have dealt with that basically brought this committee together. The root cause, as you said, with the hospitals is not something that we specifically can control. So we have to try and find another method to do it. I think the hospitals themselves have been resolving part of that problem through what I call not the urgent cares, but the freestanding emergency departments. I know there's different designations, but certainly Ocala Regional with the one on 441 near Del Webb. UF Villages Health with the one in Brownwood. There's an Advent Health facility that's going up in Bellevue. I anticipate that there will be more of these. And very honestly, I think part of it is that traditionally, ambulances have not been transporting patients to those kinds of facilities.
I would agree with you and disagree with you. A lot of it depends on the familiarity. So if you go to Hillsborough County, in the city of Tampa, they have a multitude of these off-sites or freestanding EDs. They regularly transport patients there. You get into some of the newer places like in Pasco County, where they're just now starting to see 1 or 2 of these pop up. The medical directors are a little less, little more reluctant to have them transport all patients. You know, one of the biggest fears is that as a fire rescue department, you don't want to transport somebody there and then have to turn around and come back and get them again and take them to the hospital. So, you know, there's a lot of questions that, you know, we need to entertain, I think, when we start talking about this. You know, is Suffolk County open to opening up their COPCN process for private services? You know, if you move towards a single search service line versus, you know, a hot fire rescue service line, you know, who's gonna do the inter-facility business? I mean, that's why AMR's here. That's where they make their money. They don't make their money in the 911 business, they make it on the inter-facility business. And they're a company here to make money. So I think those are all things that we need to consider and talk about.
Anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.